Well, all right. What is up? Good morning, everybody. Going to do some tube rolling in the Marshall DSL40 CR this morning. And I'm going to take us through playing the same riff on each channel. And I'm not going to change any of the settings. They've been predetermined. So the tone is not going to change. So if you think at any time the tone could be better, you're probably right, because I'm not going to mess with the EQ at all. Whatever the amp is set at to right now is what it's going to be set at throughout. And I'm going to go through, hopefully you can see the lights. I'll set the camera up so you can see the lights. We'll do the green classic gain and then the red classic gain. Then we'll do the green ultra gain and the red ultra gain. And then we'll take the chassis out, take a look around inside, throw some tubes in there, and put it back together and see how it sounds. What I'm after is adding a little more brightness to the classic gain channel and taking a little of the brightness away from the ultra gain without doing capacitor replacements. But later, if I have to do that, it'd be worth it to me just to sweeten up the tone a little bit to where I like it. And so I called Tube Depot. They're great people. Somebody always answers the phone, just like warehouse guitar speakers. Somebody always answers the phone there. Anyway, they suggested I put a pair of JJs in for that classic gain channel and then an electro harmonics tube in for the ultra gain, because the JJs tend to be brighter, the electro harmonics tends to be darker. So we'll do that. We'll see if it works. And I'm running everything so that I can get up into the sweet spot a little bit. I'm running it through the Bagheera Power Soak so that we can open this thing up and still keep the volume levels down a bit. All right, so here we go. Chassis out, and we'll go through a little bit of this. If you're interested, this will give you a good look at what's inside this amp. This is all input power, standby and power switch, transformer leads in. There's a lot of fast blow fuses in here. There's one there, and there's one over here, one there, and one over here. So that's 4 fast blow fuses, which is good, I guess. It's good to be protected, but why do we need so many little fuses in there? It's common to see 1 additional fuse, but 4 is a little unusual. Every time you power this thing up, you hear a bunch of clicks, and that's from these little solid state relays. There's one here, and then there's a couple more over here and here. But that's all the power section. Pretty standard capacitors. Everything looks good. A lot of little harnesses here. This is this board right here, back in here, is I think MIDI and effects loop. It's all the MIDI and effects loop stuff, which I think also, if we look at this board, there's a lot of integrated circuits in here. This board right here is covered with ASICs, or application specific ICs. That's a brain, a couple brains, programmable stuff, so I'm sure that's a lot of MIDI circuitry. Another interesting thing is that the boards in here are all stamped with Marshall DSL40 M2, which is kind of interesting. There's a lot of parts in here, so it's a board. They're using this board for the at least the 50 and the 100. Down here you can see where it's marked DSL40 M2. Over here on the input, this is where we plug in. We've got another one that's labeled DSL40 M2 right there. I wish my camera was better. Boy, I apologize. I just don't know what else to do about it. I don't know if it's because I'm shaking or if just the camera sucks. Probably the camera. Anyway, what I'm concerned with in here is making sure that I figure out which of the tubes are for the stage 1 and the tubes that are for the stage 2, and then that 4th tube if it's involved in the gain or if it's something else. And I think it's something else, as here's our first tube right here. This is our classic gain channel over here, and then this is our ultra gain channel over here. Our EQ is right over in here, and then we have reverb, and our master volumes are down over here. This is resonance and presence. Anyway, EQ stuff, but our first tube is right here, and it's got a coupling capacitor and resistor in there. And then our second tube is right here, and I think these are AC coupling capacitors. These is a RC network with a nice value resistor, probably a 1 or 2 watt resistor, and some coupling capacitors. This is our second tube right here. And again, we see this resistor and a capacitor, so I think we have our RC network there. Then this is valve number 3, and again with a resistor and a capacitor. So I believe we have stage 1 and 2, and then this is probably the ultra gain tube right here. I think these are part of the same. This one might even be shared between the two channels, but I'm going to go ahead with the JJ in slot 1 and slot 2, and then I'm going to put the electro harmonics over here in slot 3. Lots of integrated circuits in here. Lots of them. Little transistors back in here. There's a lot of digital in here, surprisingly enough. This is the 4th tube, and I don't see necessarily, it looks quite a bit different in its setup with the capacitors that are hooked to it. It just looks very different. So I'm assuming this one is either a phase inverter or has something to do with the effects loop. So I'm not going to do anything with that. We'll leave that as is and just focus on these. We have this resistor here, probably a signal coupling capacitor. Same one's here and the same one is here. In all 3 of those tubes we have the same resistor in the same place. So that's our signal path. I don't think there's anything else in here that's too interesting. Another relay. This separate little board for the input. That's kind of different. Kind of weird. There's a lot of little separate boards. These are all the output jacks here for your speaker selections. These are the leads from the output transformer coming back into the board. I'd hate to have to try and fix it if it broke. And then our power valves are, one is here and one is right there, and with the sockets soldered to the board, and then the sockets are also fixed to the chassis, which is nice. All right, I think I've covered about everything anybody would want to look at. Not like the Ignitor, and certainly not like your older amps. It makes me wonder about, maybe trying to find an old JCM 800 or some sort of vintage Marshall. Not vintage, but even a 1980s Marshall, I'm sure would be a lot different than this. And it makes me wonder if someday they just put tubes. Will we ever get to the point where they put tubes in just so that they can say it's a tube amp, and really the tubes are there just to glow and look pretty, and most of what's going on is actually digital circuitry? You think we're headed there? I don't know. Anyway, we'll flip this dude over and I'll set the valves. All right, we've got the chassis flipped over. These are the 3 valves right here. 1, 2, 3. That's the one we're going to leave in right there. And if you didn't know, the valve closest to your input is, I think I can say always, but 95% of the time, I don't know, usually is always V1. It's always, you can count on it being the first stage, and then it's just 1, 2, and 3. All right, and it wasn't an electro-harmonics valve that Tube Depot suggested for this third spot. It was actually a Mullard. I had put an electro-harmonics in my Ignitor, which was really cool, but in this case, as I often do, I misspoke. All right, when you pull that tube out, set it to the side, and then make sure your pins are aligned. You're always going to have a missing pin, and you don't want to bend a pin, and your slot or your socket has a missing pin slot or spot as well. And as long as you get those lined up, you should be fine. But you just get your pins lined up and then gently roll it and push down until it seats all the way down into the socket. Now this first spot also had a dampener case, so I'm going to put that over right now. And then this one has a grommet around it. I'll set that one to the side. This will be our second JJ. Line up the pins, and nice and easy. Give it a rotate till it's all the way down there and seated. So this is our third spot. Sometimes people will recommend taking those grommets out. I have enough room here. I don't think I need to. Now this one is a Marshall ECC83. These were different, only that it's branded different. It's an ECC83, but this one has a red label. This one is white labeled, and you can see that I think you might be able to see that. The plates are taller in this one that was in stage 3 over here. Let me see if I can get that to focus up. So it will probably be, this camera is just so bad. A longer plate usually means higher gain. So it's interesting that those are indeed different tubes. Maybe if I hold them like this, so I don't want the label to be in the way. That's pretty good. Alright, see how the innards are longer on this tube? That was in position 4, so it might, but it's still rated as ECC 83S, so the gain should be the same throughout. Now this Mullard has a pretty tall plate structure as well, so that could be a tonal characteristic in that other tube. Anyway, we'll get these pins lined up. Nice little rotation as you push down in. You'll feel it bottom out. Another nice thing I noticed is that right over here on top of our chassis, we have bias adjustments accessible from the outside, which is super cool. I have no idea what the bias should be. I'm thinking 70 volts right off the top of my head, but I have no idea. I've looked for a schematic on this and haven't been able to find one yet. I reached out to the gitologist and he never got back to me, but he's a pretty busy dude. So I'm thinking 70 volts, but it's nice to know that it's so accessible. So as soon as that becomes available, I can check the bias, and sometimes that makes a huge difference in the tone of your amp. When my ignitor was repaired, they did a bias adjustment, as any tech should do. Anytime an amp's being repaired, the bias should always be adjusted and checked. And it came back sounding better than it had before it left. So that was good. So I'll be eager to check the bias on this once I find out what that voltage should be. So stoked that it's right here, because it'll make these changing out these large power tubes, EL34s, a lot easier. I feel like I can do that with the biasing being so accessible. So that's cool. Way to go, Marshall. All right, here we go. Well, I'm not sure. I'll have to watch the video back and see if anything happened. It's so hard to tell when you do a speaker swap or a tube swap. I may like the original high gain tube they had in there. I may prefer that. I don't know. We'll see. But I have another opportunity to get in there with those. I do want to check the bias, and after looking up some stuff about EL34 tubes, because of the way those the test jacks are set up, I think I'm probably going to be looking at millivolts rather than volts, and probably 30 to 50. But anybody out there, if you know what this should be spec'd at, let me know. That would be great, and I'll check it. It still rips. Marshall lead tone is just sublime. Oh, and hey, here's a tip for everybody. Here's a nice juicy tidbit for everybody who watched all the way through. The Marshall pedal 91016, it's the official pedal number, looks like it's going to be available again in about a month. We have March delivery dates at Thomann. It's spelled TH, but I think like tool Thule, the roof racks. I think because it's UK, we don't say the TH like we do in America. We say Thomann. But Thomann has a delivery date of March, and Sweetwater told me they have a delivery date set for March. It's been pushed a couple of times, but that pedal is a 6-button foot switch, will allow you to choose from classic gain, overdrive 1 or 2, ultra gain, overdrive 1 or 2, reverb on and off, and effects loop on and off, which will really light this amp up, because as it is right now, I want to switch back and forth between the 2 channels on the ultra gain all day long. Those are the 2 channels I want access to. But so we'll see if that happens. 120 bucks, 100 bucks. But Thoman's already taken orders. It's just the delivery date has been set several times and keeps being pushed back. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. If you know what the biasing on that should be, let me know. We'll talk to you later.